Hello again, I'm Aaron Yates, and we're back in the Kerrville United studio this afternoon on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. The polls are open. It's early voting right now at the Callow Theater. That's been going on this week. It'll continue till this Friday, and then it'll be Monday and Tuesday of next week, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The polls are open, and they're there to take your vote. If you live anywhere within the city limits, you get to vote for two places this year, place 1 and place 2. We don't have geographical districts or precincts, so everybody that lives in the city gets to vote for both places. Election day is Saturday, May the 4th. Polls will be open that day from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So we want to encourage everybody to get out and make your voice heard here for this year's City Council election. I want to introduce my guest here this afternoon. I have with us Mr. Mario Garcia. He's a candidate for City Council Place 2. His opponent is Kim Clarkson. Just before this, you saw an interview with Mr. George Baruti, who's a candidate for Place 1, and his opponent is Mr. Gary Cochran. So first, I want to thank Mario for being here today and getting out on a rainy day.
I want to thank you for that. I appreciate it. This will be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you.
problem. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Yes, sir.
It helps this year. Well, this will be the first time we have all the candidates in the race in an interview format. So
Perfect.
it's
Wonderful.
good stuff. I know the voters have heard this a lot because if they've been to forums or they've watched them online, they know a little bit about your background, but just give us your elevator spiel about what you do, where you come from, just a little bit of your background.
I come from Kerrville. I grew up here, graduated Tivy, went in the Navy, U.S. Navy, served my time in the Navy, worked on nuke weapons. I had a top secret clearance, honorable discharge, went off to University St. Edwards, met my wife. We both moved on to the school district, Austin Independent School District. I taught a Cisco networking class and did IT work for the district. My wife was a teacher, became a principal, or was in path becoming a principal. Got married, started having kids, and I decided to stay home. So I stayed home for the 10 years with my children, and that's when I started my consulting business in Austin. And as my wife kept excelling and going into administration, I really started missing home, what it was like to be here and the experience I had. You know, when you grow up in Kerrville, at that time we only had 3 elementary schools. Mm-hmm. And we all played sports. And so by the time I hit middle school, I knew everybody. You know, you just did. That's what the community's like. And I kind of wanted that same experience for my children. So I brought them back. My wife became a principal here in a couple other schools. And then eventually, you know, I brought my business here. And I've been doing it for 14 years since we're back. And
Tell us about your business. What do you do?
My business is KerrPC, and I do IT consulting. I basically support businesses that don't have their own IT person. And so what we do is we provide that type of support, whether it be your network infrastructure, whether it be your server, your workstations, printers, anything networking, VPNs, remoting, and that sort of stuff. Most of the stuff I do remotely. I have a lot of local businesses here in Kerrville. I have some very large businesses in San Antonio, Houston, Dallas. That's about most of them there. And so I provide the IT services for that. We have I have a couple guys that'll pull wiring and do things like that. And so, but
anything IT related sounds like.
Pretty much, yeah, okay. Yes, sir. And then we're going in. You know, everyone wants to go in the cloud now, so we're doing all the cloud services. We'll get you on whatever you want to use, Google or Amazon's AWS and stuff like that. So that's what.
So what got your attention? Well, I started seeing you at council meetings within the last year or so, maybe a little bit longer ago than that.
About 3 years.
3 years, okay.
Yeah.
So what kind of got your attention and focus onto the city politics?
So my wife had brought an application to my son, and she thought he'd be great to try out for the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, he couldn't drive at the time, so he started telling me, Dad, I'm kind of interested. He wasn't too much in the beginning, and then all of a sudden he filled out the application and he jumped into it. And then he said, I want to go to council meetings. Mm-hmm. And we started going to council meetings. I'm driving him there because he couldn't drive. Mm-hmm. And I sat there probably for the first couple of years and just listening, and I thought it was interesting. And as I started, you know, seeing what was going on and finding a voice and a perspective, I guess probably the best way to say it, I thought I would share it. And that's what I've been doing. And you probably know I've been standing up and speaking and saying certain things, but other than that, that's how it started. So.
Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha. I like to help people draw contrast because I think that's how we help make our decisions and stuff. Yeah. So your resume, just compared to your opponents, you know, she has more volunteer service, more nonprofit and serving on boards. Yeah. You don't. Not to say that that's right or wrong, but how should voters evaluate that?
You know, you listen to what are the criteria for being city council, and you know, I think it's very simple. What do you have on your resume doesn't matter. It's to the voters. You can sit there and list everything you want, and then how active or how you can be involved in boards, but how impactful has that been? It hasn't been a positive or negative impact, man. And I think every time that question is brought up, I think about people in our community that probably have not gone to city council meetings. I don't know if you know, but Coach Pfeiffer, you know, he coached me.
Yep, me too.
Coach Pfeiffer, his family, Bessie Pfeiffer, they've been here since 1870 something. If there's anybody that should represent Kerrville up there, that family should be up there. I'm looking at my uncle. My uncle is comes from being a vice president of Xerox, and I'm thinking of him sitting there. And you know, does he frequently go to council meetings? No, but the skills and the requirements that you need to go there, you know, it has more to do with what your footprint is here in the community than it is what is on what I feel is your resume. You know, I'm a big Tom Brady fan, so I'm gonna tell you that everybody, you know, crossed him out and said, "No, look at it, 6th round, 199 pick." You know, you know, no one could see the heart that that person had, and I think that's what's really important. Is when you look around and want to criticize somebody and say, you know, you're not qualified. There's a lot of people in our community that have the heart and the spirit. Maybe they feel disenfranchised. But if we can bring that back and bring whatever skills, whatever education, whatever mindset they have to help in fulfilling what our community can be. So,
very good. So tell us a little bit about, I was talking to George at the last interview. You didn't get to hear it, of course, you'll hear it later.
No,
but you know, talking about how you guys kind of became into an alignment, and he said that y'all share some philosophical viewpoints and stuff. How did you get on board with George, or how did you guys kind of come together?
Yeah, I knew George from Little League, but I only knew him as an umpire. You know, he was umpiring a lot of my kids' sports, and I was coaching. That's how we kind of knew each other. I didn't really get to know George until maybe after he got on council, and I'm going to the council meetings with my son and listening, and I started thinking about what he was saying and appreciating the information he's trying to put out, and it educates you and makes you want to do more research. So that kind of happened, and then I've talked to him. We've sat and had conversations. We actually had him and his wife and my wife, we actually had a dinner, couple dinners, I would say, and we've actually ironed out what is it you stand for. And the biggest thing is what I agree with too, is that if we have 15,000 registered voters here and only 4,000 showing up, and you know, I've heard you say it, the last election was a big one because it was a mayoral election. What is the problem with the rest? What makes them feel like they're disenfranchised, and how do we reach out to them? And if we can reach out to them, then the more ideas, you know, the more information that we can get, that I think it only betters our community. I really do. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Very good. One of the things that I asked George about too, I'll quit saying that after this one because you don't know his responses or anything or what I asked him.
Yeah,
but
I don't know.
one of the things I asked the other candidates too, because it got brought up and it hurt them, I think personally, is there were people around town that were saying that you and George were the only conservatives in the race or the only Republicans in the race. First off, does that matter? Does party ideology matter in a local race? And second, do you know that to be the case or not? True or false?
Party ideology. I mean, we're a nonpartisan race, so I mean, I think I love it in that sense because it's more about the issues and the ideas that are being put out. But repeat your question. I understand that.
Are you and George the only Republicans in the race, as far as you know? And does it matter?
I have no idea. I have no idea. And that coming up, I heard about it. I think the time I heard about it was somebody had called and said that there was a Republican.
We won't throw anybody under the bus, but there was a well-known political group in town that was passing that information around.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could see it on the internet. It was a former mayor who actually got up and said that, and I'm looking at it and I don't know what he's talking about. So, and I don't know where it originated from. It wasn't from me. I can tell you that right now.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
that's good. That's good. Another way to draw contrast between you guys, and you know, because we've written about it, we always look at the whole entire available public record for candidates, whether it's their tax history and their voting history and all those things.
Yeah.
So you have not participated in as many of the local elections in the years past.
Yeah.
Does that matter to voters, or how do you explain that when people ask you that question?
Then you probably have to ask all the 11,000 other voters that are doing the same thing. And I think what happens is it could be apathy, it could be that. I'll give it, probably could be that. I think the other thing too is it's probably a faith. It's this thing where you have all these individuals who are married, have children, they're probably coaching their children, they're going to church, they're providing for their families, they're paying their taxes, they're doing everything that requires for themselves that satisfies their life. And I think they have this faith, and I think I can say that because I was there too. You have this faith that, are you really thinking about me? Are you really concerned about me? You know, we talked, we hadn't, but there's the valuations that just came out from the property evaluations, and and I thought, you know, I know it's not them, you know, but the idea is that who's going to talk about that and how it affects the families? I mean, we're in your house here, and so this is great, but the idea is, how does that affect you? And I think what we do is we have faith that our leaders are going to do that. And for me, I think I started realizing, no, I need to voice it out now. I think it's time. And that's kind of what's really happened, is starting that. As far as, is that important about my history? I don't think so. That's to sit there and look at every kid that's been out there who wants to, for the first time, sign up and want to go. I want to join student council, and yet in middle school or maybe elementary, if they had it, that you didn't do it. You didn't do it then, so you're not qualified. You're not qualified to do that. And I just think that's wrong. I think everybody in their own time is going to find their spirit and their moment where they're saying, now I want to stand up. Now I want to be an example. I mean, I'm doing this for, I always say this, but I want to do it for my mom. I always want to make my mom proud. And I'm doing it for my children to be an example. But more importantly, I got to do it for the city. The city is what raised me. The city is beautiful in the fact that we've always had elders. And because you have elders, they kind of pass on down, you know, their values to you. And I'm looking around and seeing all my elders who are beyond retirement. They're saying, you know, we're done. And I'm taking that mantle and says, you know, I want to thank you for all that you've given me, and now let me see if I can carry that on. So,
Gotcha. I want to ask you just a couple of things about campaign finance report. I asked the other candidates about this too. For one, you and George Broody have raised less money than your opponents. Does that have anything to do with anything? Should it matter to anybody? Because there was a big article in the paper about it.
Money, should it matter?
We wish it didn't, right?
And no, in the sense that you're talking about, should the voters care who?
Should the voters care what's in your campaign finance reports? Who raised the most money? Who spent the most money?
That is a very good question. I would say what would really be neat to sit there and see is that how much money did they get and how did they spend it? You know, that'd be really neat to take a look at who really is looking out after the dollar. You know, who's really looking, or, you know, we're talking about money, but what marker showed that was a good return for them when they spent it on whatever ad or whatever postcards or whatever it may be. But I mean, that's be something there, but I don't think so. I've never looked at this as being a money race. I've looked at it as being the hearts of the voters. And that's really what I'm looking at. I'm really wanting to step out and walk around all the neighborhoods and reach as many houses as I can. So that's how I see it, though.
Gotcha. Yeah. The only other question I want to ask about that, just because it kind of broke some records, I think it was the biggest individual donation that's ever been given to a city council campaign from a gentleman that gave you $5,000. The only reason I think it's important is people have said he may have some business that comes before the city council in the next couple of years. And so if you were to get elected, is that going to have any bearing on how you look at anything that comes before you?
That is a very good question. No, I would say no. And I will tell you, that individual, when he gave it to me, I have not spoken to him. No, I have. I've spoken to him one time since he's given that check. And this is, what, months now. And it was only because we were at a council meeting, and he was there. And he came out and said hi to me, and that was it.
Gotcha.
And I think what the point is that he must have heard what I said. I think, in fact, when he gave it to me, he said, I heard you at council meetings, and I want to support you. And he gave me that. And that's a very humbling thing. Let me tell you, and I appreciate that. But let me tell you, the one that was, I probably shouldn't say her name, but it was in the Doyle Center, and we were walking through the neighborhood, and I'll say her first name. I'll say Pam. Pam. And I'm sitting there talking to her in her living room, and I'm done, and she says, I appreciate you coming to my house. No one's coming to my house. And she says, hold on, I'll be right back. And she says, I'm going to give you something for a donation. I said, no, ma'am, that's not necessary. And she brought me $4. And let me tell you, I'll never forget that. So, you want to look at, how you really want to, support this community. You got to work. You got to work really hard. And so I'm willing to do that. So,
Good deal. Only other reason that is important or might not be is that some people want to characterize the candidates with the most money as representing the elite, or your opponent raised more money, so she's representing the elite class. Is that a characterization that you would agree with, or no?
I've been at the polls, so I'm sitting there. So you could probably sit there and say that some of the people that I've seen that come up have nicer cars. Mm-hmm. But I mean, what are you going to say about that? I mean, I don't even think about that. I really don't. I'm looking at those people, and they're just citizens like everybody else, just like Pam was. Mm-hmm. And I have no problem, talking to them or approaching them. In fact, I was telling my wife yesterday, I says, when I win, because my wife says, you got to say that, when I win, I'm going to treat every person as if you voted for me. Mm-hmm. Whether you did or not, I'm going to treat you that way, whether you voted for me or not. Because if I were to sit there and try and start inside my heart and soul, start breaking you up and separate and says, oh, I think this person was on the other side, who cares? Mm-hmm. I want to treat everybody as if you voted for me, and I want to thank you for that. And I want to treat them that way as well too. So, and I hope that makes it approachable, so that they can sit there and say, I got to go talk to this guy. Mm-hmm.
And I ask you some of these things not because I'm trying to accuse you or anything. These are things that people say around town, and now is your chance to respond to them. So
okay.
That's the reason. So let's talk about some of the issues that really matter to some of the people in town now that we're past all the political stuff. Some of the things that you've claimed you've made advertisements in the newspaper, and you kind of seem to have like a theme in the newspaper about the city's finances, the city's debt.
Yeah.
What's your general feeling on the city's debt and finances, and what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong as a city?
That actually came about with doing some research. I don't think a lot of people that I walk around the neighborhoods didn't know initially when I first started out what the debt was. Mm-hmm. So when I found out, it was a matter of fact. I've kind of been surprised that you actually see that some of the councilmen is as if it's being projected as, it's all scary, we need to be worried about it. I've never meant it to be that way. I meant it to be as a matter of fact. It's $63 million. I will say that because I grew up here, I grew up with a lot of former mayors and councilmen, and I've presented that to them as, what is your perspective on that? And they've all shared with me that, yeah, that's not good. They didn't say it was absolutely wrong. It says, it's just not good. What do we spend this on? And so that's when it comes up. And as far as the information, and you pointed out, I thought that was actually pretty good, that the sheet of paper that I was passing out, and also what I put in the paper, that it wasn't reflective with the per capita and the debt that was there, and it wasn't accurate. And I didn't dawn on me because I actually took it from the Texas Comptroller website.
I know you. I found the same chart. It was wrong on the website.
Right. So that was beautiful, to be honest with you. I think that was great. And so it made me have to go back and find out what's wrong. So I called the Texas Comptroller website. I don't remember was it Justin I spoke to? And Justin was at the bond review board. So I spoke to him. At first at the Texas Comptroller website, he says, we get our data from the Bond Review Board, so you need to call them. And I said, okay, fine. So I called the Bond Review Board, spoke to Justin there, and he said, well, I don't know what they're using. Maybe they're using a different census per population. And so he started looking into that, and he was like, I don't know what they're doing. But we narrowed it down, and we refined a little bit more, but it's still roughly the same,
Yeah, it wasn't a gigantic.
Yeah, it wasn't
He's probably
huge.
Thinking, nobody ever asked this before. Who is this?
Yeah, but I thought that was great because this is exactly what I don't have a problem with. I put something out, you looked at it, you said, well, let's just do the numbers there, and you actually did the numbers. Says, well, that's not accurate. And it made me think, well, God, I have to go call Texas and find out what's going on. And sure enough, I did. And so it was only a point to bring up because no one was aware of it. And I think when you do bring it up, it's the next question is that, okay, then what did we spend it on? Mm-hmm. All right. And then I think that's what we're going to next, right? Mm-hmm. So
that could be, we can take it whichever way you want. But just kind of overall, though, before we get into any specifics of how we spend it, are we in an okay place financially, or do you think we need to do
We're going to pay our bills for sure. But we do know that when we spent the money, it wasn't on infrastructure. It wasn't on the primary. We're going to argue probably if you want to get into the reuse pond, but we're going to argue whether that it was the infrastructure. And from my opinion, it's not. Okay, that we did on the ball fields. Ball fields is not an infrastructure. We know that, and so now we need to probably evaluate what are our priorities. Mm-hmm. And you probably get into this to the 2050 plan and that whole thing about 2050 plan, the 100% said we need to maintain infrastructure.
Right.
Everybody says that, and that's not even surprising.
I don't think I hope no one would say, well, we can let it all crumble.
So with that money that we spent, what could we have gotten done with our infrastructure? Mm-hmm. And that begs the question. So in a lot of ways, it's just what are our priorities and what do we listen to? Because the ballpark was probably 3 or 4 tiers down from underneath that, mm-hmm. and yet we still citizens are expecting that first priority, and almost to a sense to where we can't satisfy if we to a certain percentage say, okay, we've really taken care of infrastructure, can we now look to these other things? And then I would say that we have already without satisfying that.
And I think to further what you said about a lot of people just don't know or they didn't know, and that you were trying to help shed some light on it, we try to do that too. And I think it's important that people know, there's different pots of money that the city gets, or there's different revenue sources, and some can only be spent one way or another. And that's where we were when we wrote a rebuttal to your ad was trying to say, okay, well, the ball fields may not, people may think roads and infrastructure above ball fields, but that was a different set of money that must be used, for economic development type purposes and not for repairing streets and stuff.
Yeah, and the point too, when we were talking about that, they were trying to break it up, that it wasn't tax supported. It is tax supported. You can go call if you want to. Go call the Texas Comptroller website, and you'll see it. And you go load the bond review board because it has a spreadsheet also, and all of that is tax supported. Now, is it meaning in the sense that it's being paid by taxes, which is what the city was kind of saying that no, this
not paid by taxes,
but it's all of
but
it
is tax supported.
It's all city
like
debt.
Having a cosigner on a loan, that person's not paying it back. But if something happens, the cosigner is going to get.
And I thought it was interesting when it was presented, when it says, what's our debt like? And it was as if you and I are a couple, right? And yet what they reflected, and you say you're more conservative in your spending than I am, and I want the brand new car, and you said, no, I'm driving the used vehicle. And yet you have a gas card right there, and you represented our financial situation through that one gas card, and that wasn't accurate in a sense. And I think then the next meeting, the last meeting, or the one before last, that actually kind of clarified it all. And I thought that was really great. It finally said that.
I will agree there. It's good that brought that discussion up, and now everybody's more educated. It was like a little civics class at that meeting you're referring to.
And then even on the website, they were talking about taxes and water and K-Pub and how it reflected. But it really makes it look like it's separate, but it's not separate. It's all
it's all guaranteed, so to speak, by the tax revenue.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So one of the things you said too that I thought was interesting on your ad over the weekend, you suggested maybe using kind of pay as we go or pay go or saving up instead of using debt. Do you think using debt to finance some projects is always bad, or are there certain instances where we should use debt and certain instances where we shouldn't? I'll give you just a specific one that came, recently the Legion lift station, we spent about $10 million or so to upgrade that because it was hindering some development on that side, and everybody agreed, we need to upgrade it. To me, I think if you give a $10 million debt election, a lot of citizens that don't know are going to say, well, I don't want to take on any more debt, we don't need that, and vote no. So in that case, it seems to me like we can't do it without debt because we don't have that much money.
Right.
But then if we put it to the citizens for a vote, they might vote no, and then we're still in a bad place.
Right.
So kind of what is your feeling? Does everything need to be paid for in cash? Is it okay to use debt sometimes?
Yeah, I don't think we need to go to the citizens to buy an extra truck for maintenance and put that on the ballot. But I think there's a significant amount of debt we're going to go into. And I think here's the part about it is that I don't have a problem working. I don't have a problem going out to all the citizens and explaining what this is for and how the impact that they'll get from that, or the positive impact they'll get from it. And I think sometimes what we do is just make it easier to just have council vote. And when you do that, it negates the rest of the population. And I think they need to be informed. When you sit there and say that, well, the Legion lift station, if we were to go put that on the ballot, and you're saying, well, what if they don't? If they actually vote that down, then we didn't do a good job, educating them on what the importance of this is for. Or better yet, we didn't even debate it well enough in front of them to sit there and say, because I'm sure some will say, well, do we really need development on that side of town? And others would say, yes, we do because of this. And to really, educate. I'm big about, this involving the citizens. I am. And why is that? 'Cause I come from that. I come from the idea that I had faith. And so inform me, let me know. One of the things, that I've heard said is at many council meetings, they'll sit there and say, Mr. City Manager or Deputy City Manager, I want to thank you. You answered all my questions today. I appreciate that. In the last 3 years, I've been in the audience. I'm like, what was the question? I'd love to know. What is it? What your concerns were? What did you hear? And then were they the same questions that I have? Or are they different? Or maybe she had even some that I didn't know, and I'd love to hear those too. And I'd love for the citizens to be more informed. I think the more we involve the citizens, the better picture we're going to get of the direction that Kerrville should go. So,
So Let's see, let me go. You've already answered a couple of these I already had here.
Okay.
So one of the things that may come up, there may be a new debt issue put before the citizens for a public safety complex. If you were to be elected, that would probably happen in the next 2 years, according to the city's financial documents. Is that an example of one that, how would you approach that? If that's a need that the city has, how do we go about financing that? Kind of just what is your overall thought on whether or not we need to do that?
Well, I met with Chief Knight a couple weeks ago, and he took me to a tour through the whole building, and I really asked that question to him too, and he said there were some concerns with the roof that leaks and how old the building is, and I think there's some HVAC equipment probably needs replaced, and he actually gave me some different scenarios. It may be over at McFarland where I grew up in, or it could be in the same location where it's at. I can't sit there and tell you that definitively that I know what the answer is. I also spoke to Chief Smith over the fire, and he said the same thing too, is that he actually leaned towards, you know, we could centralize everything, and he wasn't like all for or all against it either. He was like, we're doing our job, we're getting our job done. Mm-hmm. So I understood what Chief Knight was telling me about the police station. You know, some of the things that we talk about spending, you know, you may have heard me say it, that I'm a strongtowns.org supporter. I don't know if you've looked it up, but for that, it's really a conservative approach. It's an incremental thing. I'll bring up the ball fields again. My kids brought this up, which I thought was interesting. So my kids are playing. They're still playing tournaments over here, and I thought it was interesting. My daughters were telling us on the way home that it's not the same. And I thought, why? I don't understand why it's not the same. You're playing sports and everything else. She goes, well, on the old fields, it was more of a family. You know, families had to, run the concession stands. Families had to pick up the trash at all the different trash bins all the way around the fields, on all the fields, and go dump it. If your kid played there, you do that. And it created a really interesting community within Kerrville. And I thought, had we spent a quarter, not even a quarter, a tenth of what we paid paid for the ball fields over here, will we still have that close-knit, family and community? And, so when you kind of go over there, it's a beautiful facility, don't get me wrong. But are we more distant now? Are we more connected through it? Or are we more separated? And that's kind of, I think, what my daughters are trying to tell me and my wife, is that, we miss that connection. And I'm very big about making our town strong, and the way it does it is through our community. So,
well, hopefully they start building that community feeling out there eventually. So maybe it's too new.
Could be too new, or too big, or
yeah.
too dry. I don't know. Just, yeah.
So speaking of just economic development again, 4B sales tax money is what the source of money that was used to pay for most of the ball fields and the river trail and things like that. Should we be doing something different with those economic development dollars? We've spent quality of life, ball fields, quality of life, river trail, and the citizens seem to enjoy those things, and they're happy that we have them now, especially the river trail. But are those the right types of decisions for our economic development dollars in the future?
You're saying, when you first brought it up, you said the citizens are enjoying it. Do you know the numbers?
No,
when
I
you
don't.
say that? Yeah.
No, I don't personally.
Yeah.
They have numbers.
Yeah,
in different
I've had a few
departments.
people
Yeah.
tell me they've enjoyed them, and I've had more than a few tell me that they don't. Why do we spend our money on that? And and then the ball fields themselves, what was that supposed to do? And I think what we're looking at is this tourism dollar, trying to capture that. I understand that, but why are we trying to take care of people who are going to visit Kerrville, pour all this money into wanting to make sure they have a good time, when we should be taking care of the citizens here? I mean, if you take a look at both, the amount of money for both the ball fields and the river trail, what could we have done with that? What priorities were probably put in the back burner to accomplish those that we could have gotten taken care of, that the citizens would have appreciated? I think everything needs to come all the way back down to the citizens, and it'd be really neat, because you made a claim that most citizens enjoy it. I'd be really curious to see what the number is. If Kerrville could put out some sort of online ballot to see the response. You can't sit there and critique something that you've already gotten. It's like you just put a pool in my backyard, and I want to sit there and start criticizing. First of all, for the first month we're enjoying it and we're having every party we can. But the second, when it starts coming around, who's going to pay for it? We're going to pay for it. And so, I get it. My kids are participating and enjoying it. But I'm really curious of what could we have done with that money that the citizens would have come back and said to you or to me and say, good job, guys. That our Main Street or cleaner water, whatever, you're taking care of us. You're taking care of us that are here. Than the ones who are visiting saying, good job, guys. We appreciate this weekend. Maybe we'll see you next time, you know. Yeah.
So at least they leave us their sales tax dollars when they go. Let's talk about housing, because I know this is something that's come up in all of the forums, and it's come up in all the forums for the last 10 years. But do you see housing as a problem in Kerrville, and then how do we fix it if there is a problem?
I don't think there's any quick solution. Yes, of course there's a problem with housing. It looks like it's been escalating for the last decade, I think, from looking at values of properties and what they were 10 years ago to what they are now. Are you going to fault people who've decided to move into Kerrville? That's where it started? No, I can't think you can do that. Could it be because Texas is, and it's not just in Kerrville, but Texas itself is worried about, you know, the property values. In fact, they're trying to pass, you know, that there's legislation right now. There's the
SB2 and
yeah,
HB2.
Yeah, they're trying to pass both of those because of the fact that our property values are escalating too much, and they're worried about the citizens in Texas, but primarily in your small town as well. They're trying to cap that revenue rate, and so I think for me it has to do with, and I've heard, I think at one of the forums, one of the opponents mentioning using 86 acres that we have outside and trying to,
that's
in the direction towards the Legion lift station. You know, I'm not I'll tell you right now, a big proponent of that. And first of all, I think why would you, there's a slim road that goes through that we're going to bring utilities and services to an area that's further out. Why can't it be incremental in that direction? So probably the key word for me is going to be incremental. For me, it's smaller projects. I'm seeing a lot of neighborhoods that have vacant lots. What are we doing to encourage those homeowners to? And I can't tell you there's a silver bullet for it. But why can't we fulfill those neighborhoods? Why can't we strengthen those neighborhoods? Why can't we bring the neighborhood back to where it used to be? And some of the homes were dilapidated, so they tore them down. But we haven't done anything on those properties. I'd love to see those neighborhoods come back. That'd be a big goal for me, is to see that. I'm a big proponent about strengthening our neighborhoods, and then our neighborhoods will strengthen the city, and then we'll have what's considered a strong town. So that, I don't think any of us could sit there and tell you that this is the direction to go. I will tell you that I'm not big about the probably annexing another piece of property and developing it. If you take a look at it, that's another liability. If you get into, take a look at strongtowns.org, this is an engineer gentleman here who is, and it's a group, it's an organization, but he's a spokesman for it. And I agree with what he's saying, is that is a liability. The moment you take that over from a developer, immediately we're enjoying the taxes that we're receiving, but then bingo, then they hit 20, 25 years when it's going to drop, and now it becomes a liability, which is what Kerrville is sitting on. What I think right now is all our roads within the city limits, those are our liabilities. How much focus are we putting on that? You know, how much is, how much lead is in the ground? I have no idea, and I'd love to have that answer. To what do we need to replace, and have we ever brought that up to the public and said, this is why we're going to spend this money here? So there are some primary services that everybody that's a citizen here expects, and we need to provide that. I mean, we incorporated ourselves as a city for the citizens. So let's never forget that our primary focus needs to be them. And as far as that developing out there, we're prolonging another liability that is going to come down the road, and so strengthen our neighborhoods. I'll give you one that BC Richards. I mentioned this.
I haven't
you
heard
grew up here, right?
Yes.
Okay, you BC Richards, which is the Travis Little Park over there, that square.
Okay, yes,
okay,
I didn't
right?
remember the name. Yes.
You tell me that. You know that park right now, right? Okay, I was just there last weekend, right? Tell me if it looks any different since you were a kid.
There's less stuff there probably. It seems like there was more playground equipment or something, but it's for the most part it seems the same.
It's just the 4 backstops.
Yeah.
And
that one. I'm sorry, I was on a different. Now I know which one you're talking about.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I do.
Yeah.
Yes, it doesn't look any different.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Since I was a kid. So where has been in our leadership the priorities of, like, why haven't we grown that neighborhood? Why? I was speaking to a woman this morning. That's the only reason why it's coming, because she's in that neighborhood, and she came out and she voted today, and she said, I like what you said, and I told her about the neighborhood. It's that, why haven't we have a walking trail around there yet? I pictured this. This is what I was thinking. A walking trail, baseball, backstops that are there, because my kids practice there at that field, and maybe a playground set. So here I pictured a mother who has to take her son to have baseball practice, and she she's there with him, and she tells her younger son or daughter, and says, you can play in the playground. Says, I'm going to do my walking today. And she's walking around for 30, 40 minutes, maybe an hour, while her older son is having practice, and the other one's playing there, and maybe playing with a group of kids from the neighborhood. And I can picture that. And then I can actually see the neighborhood around there just all gravitating to that park, either daily or on the weekends. Maybe even a little pavilion there, so they can have a little, whether it be a little concert or, something there, facility for them to have little parties and everything. But you know it and I know it, that park is the same, and I'm 50 years old. And that park has not changed since as long as I can remember.
True.
Okay.
There is, to speak of focusing on certain neighborhoods and building up neighborhoods in town, there's been a focus on enhancing the downtown. And there's been different things. There's streetscape enhancements, there's enhancements to the parking garage, there's the TERS plan, the tax incremental reinvestment zone, all those different things. Do you think that is one of the neighborhoods that we should be focusing on, kind of in your vision for the future of Kerrville?
Downtown, I told you I speak to a lot of former mayors and councilmen, and let me tell you, some of them go back 30-something years of when they were in office, and I respect their input, and they're saying, for all the time they've been here, everybody's been complaining about downtown. So it's not anything new, okay? So let's get that quite clear. And as far as you brought TERS and everything else, and I can tell you that no one knows about TERS. Unless you're going to council meetings, no one knows about TERS. You and I can go outside and go walk 3 or 4 houses and ask them about TERS, and they won't know anything about it. They'll look at you because of the word itself, like you're an alien, like, what are you talking about? And therein is where I say we didn't do a good enough job selling it to the community. And I'm just big about work. We need to work. When you look at city council, we're sitting behind this nice pretty desk in some very plush chairs, okay? And it seems as if sometimes we're sitting there and we're saying, you know what, the only ones we're going to listen to are the ones who walk through that door. We need to get out for those chairs. We need to get around that counter. We need to get in the neighborhoods and find out exactly what they think about TERS. And sell it, if we think I'm not convinced, okay, so I'll put that out right now. I'm not convinced it's the best mechanism we should use. I'm not convinced. I'm dying for somebody to come up and really debate me on this or go through, sell it to me. Let's see, because I got to turn around and sell it to the citizens. But it hasn't been convinced to me, and for sure has not been convinced to the citizens because they don't know anything about it. So in that note, we should have done a better job because it's and here's the other thing I have about the TERS that I don't like is that pot of money that's going to grow through the increment. You can go get another loan on it. You can go get another bond on it. And that doesn't require voters at all. It's built into the whole mechanism. You don't have to take it to the voters. It's just council. And if we were going to talk about what's been voting now by council and what we got to in the direction we're at right now, then imagine what decision we're going to make to make those votes too, saying, yeah, let's go. We got $1 million in there. Well, let's go get 15, just so we can get it right now. I don't know if you're aware of it, but if you ever take a look at, there's a lot of explanations by some financial experts. I like to listen to a guy named Ray Dalio, and he talks about any debt you go into right now he talks about the cyclical mechanism of it is you're curbing expenses in the future, or you're spending less in the future. It's a natural.
Right.
It's just given.
It's kind of the nature of debt.
Exactly.
You're parlaying future income or future stuff.
So we're
to pay
saying,
for something now.
Yeah, we're paying for something now, knowing we're going to be spending less in the future. So look at it right now. We paid for the river trail and the ballparks. Are we really going to justify spending less for that looking back now? I don't know.
That's the choice we made.
That's the choice we made, exactly. And that's where I think we needed to involve the citizens for them to know. If I'm going to tell you, look, we're going into debt because we need new roads or repair roads or maybe the water system, whatever it may be, then we can sell that. Let's just do that. Let's go out there and get on foot and get into every community. And that way, but then last, as long as we explain it, we also now put it on the ballot and let them choose. If we didn't do a good enough job to explain it to them and they vote it down, that's our fault. Okay, it really is. And I'm pushing for it and I want it and I think it's important, then we didn't do a good enough job. And I just, we're in a republic / democracy. So there are people who believe that you voted me in, so shh. No, I'm going to vote now, No, it's still the same. Why am I walking around? Because the truth is the only thing that's going to get me in that seat would be the voters. And so we need to work. And the work doesn't stop once you sit in that seat. I'd like to think that we could probably every quarter is to set up meetings in different neighborhoods and explain what's coming down the pike. What is we're looking at. This is what our perspective is. What do you think about it? You know, there are so many experts that have retired that are here that could bring some input in, but they're not going to come unless we go out and reach to them. I'm not the kind to sit there and think that when you walk through the door, that's only when I'm going to listen to you. No. If that were true, then why is my opponent and why is Cochran and why is Baruti, why are they walking around? Because the ultimate importance is the citizens. So we can't negate that. We need to make sure that not only do we tell them you're relevant in this voting, you're relevant in the entire process. So please stay with us. Stick with us. Let's keep going on this, you know, and every quarter let's have a meeting at different neighborhoods and say, look, what do you think? Give me your ideas. And I'd love to do it even with somebody. Here's what would be beautiful. I'd say, let's just say Ms. Eichner or Sigmund, you can pick anyone, that they are against me in a sense. Well, then let's go do a debate in front of the community. And I'll share my ideas and she can share her ideas, or mayor, doesn't matter. They can share their ideas and let's let the citizens bring some input. And then maybe, you know, I always think that when I have a discussion with my wife, I'm never right, she's never right, it's always something in the middle. I think we'll end up finding out a little bit more about not only our points, but the citizens will help us out finish out the picture of it. So that's me. Sorry, I talked too much.
No,
So.
that's what we're here to listen to what you have to say.
Okay.
The one of the ways that I think the city went out recently and tried to get citizen involvement, and they did, you know, they had pretty good citizen involvement, was the Kerrville 2050 plan. So that was, you know, there was input from people across the community. They tried to get more, of course. You would always hope to have more.
Yes.
But all those people came together, different subcommittees, you know, several hundreds and thousands of hours of meeting times and stuff like that. They make the Kerrville 2050 plan.
Yeah.
Do you think that how should council, if you were to be elected, what would you use the Kerrville 2050 plan for? Is it a kind of a guidepost?
Of course, yeah, it's a guide.
What's your philosophy on that plan?
For sure, it's a guide. I think it goes out pretty far out. You know, I was sitting there thinking, you're in technology, and so am I. I mean, you know, in 30 years, you got an idea that some of the things in the plan is like, oh, I'm not seeing that, but I get the point with their, you know, exercising this mindset.
Setting some kind of goals at least for now, right?
But I'm, you know, I think it should be used as a guide, but I think I'd like to have a shorter gap. I think a 5-year plan. I think, you know, we have that, but then on top of that, hit a 10. Maybe a 15. So what we use is the 5, and the 5 helps us review the 10. So as we're progressing through this 5-year plan, you know, short increments, small projects, you know, that kind. You know where I'm going with this. So once we do that, that'll actually reveal the 10. No, with the 10, we need to focus on this on the 10 as we're getting closer to completing the 5, and doing that in short increments. But do it to where it's now in the sense. I mean, we did the ballparks now, but there are some things, Kerrville, now that would probably see instantly, immediately, that would have an effect on the communities. And I would like to see that. So of course it's a guide, yeah. And I'm sure there was a lot of hours put in there. My wife was involved in it. My son was involved in it as well. So I know that they had a lot of input in it too. I'm curious, and I don't know, was there any information that was left out that some people had really good ideas? It's almost as if, here's the 2050 plan, and I would love to have seen maybe an appendix to it that says, and these other ideas were things that were brought up, which we could always bring back and implement. And list the person whose ideas they were or what subcommittee it was. And that way we can always have a reference to, as we're reading the comprehensive plan, saying, why didn't anybody think of this? We can actually go to the appendix and say, oh, they did. And maybe have something like, well, we think, you know, whatever it may be, costs or whatever
and
time.
We discussed it and we decided as a committee we're going with this way.
Yeah, see, and that's the picture.
I'm sure there are minutes there somewhere. I bet the city secretary, I bet she has a binder this thick. So
and wouldn't that be a better? Wouldn't that be a better picture? Yeah, and that's me. I want to hear
supplement.
Yeah,
to hear
I want to hear
what else was discussed.
Yeah, thank you. I want to hear the whole picture. Let's see the whole picture as much as we can and see that. So. That's kind of what I would have loved to see in the 2050 plan. That way, if I'm thinking something, I can go to the appendix and say, oh yeah, they did bring this up, but they said it's because of this. Okay, okay. Or no, I disagree. And maybe in the process say, you know what, this was brought up over here. Why can't we think about that now 3, 4, 5 years into it? And somebody may say, you know what, that's not a bad idea. Let's look at that now. Okay.
I mentioned with George last time, I thought there was a good example of that happening when the gentleman came that said the thoroughfare plan was putting the road through his current house. Were you there for that? I think that was two
The council meeting?
meetings back.
Yeah,
And
I was there.
They kind of, you know, he left there satisfied because they said, okay, we're going to discuss it. It's not set in stone. We'll look at it and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So.
And I love the fact he came out and said it and wouldn't just sit back and say, well, let's see what happens, or you know.
Right.
I love to see the citizens come up and talk. I mean, I think that's the picture right there. That's the color.
Yep.
That's the color.
Last night, a bunch of citizens came out again. It was good.
Yeah, I couldn't be there. I had a vigil for a friend of mine who's not doing very well.
Sorry to
it's
hear that.
A guy that I went to school with, and anyway.
Well, you catch it online later.
Yeah.
A lot of people said a lot of good things. So. Those are all the topics I had to discuss with you. So at this point, anything else that you'd like to discuss or anything you'd like to speak directly to the citizens?
You caught me off guard here, so I thought we had a whole other list of stuff to go through.
No, we could probably go on for hours, but nobody would care to watch us talk that long. So
how long have we been so far?
We'll leave it at, I think we've been about 30 or 40 minutes.
Okay.
So that's usually where we like to leave it. Sometimes it goes longer, sometimes shorter, but we can certainly do it again.
So I'm closing this out?
If you'll just look at the voters and tell them anything else you'd like to say to them,
Okay.
and then I'll remind them about early voting, and then we'll call it a day.
All right. First thing I want to do is shake your hand. Thank you for this. This is fun. I love doing this, particularly when it goes out to the citizens. Let me tell you, because they need to know who they're voting for, and I want to thank you for this. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here.
And the only thing I can probably tell the citizens is that, you know, there is a difference between me and my opponent, and I hope that it's clear. That way you can have an informed decision on who you're wanting to vote for. You know, I'm a more conservative, small projects, smaller debts. We didn't even get into the debts thing a little bit, which is good or bad or something. And I say debt is bad if you can't have a return on it, and debt is good if you can show a return or a marker for the citizens. So how are we going to sit there and track the river, you know, the river trail and say, oh no, that's brought money in. Really? How are we going to do that? And then the ballparks too, that's brought money. So in that way is that I think everything needs to come back to the citizens. Everything needs to be presented to you. As a representative of you and sit in the chair, you should expect me to sit down and be comfortable for the next 2 years. You should expect your candidate to work, want to work, and particularly want to reach out to you. And then I think lastly, as someone who you think you can talk to, I really don't have a problem. I would love for you to say something bad to me. I really, because I want you to see that's you have an opinion. It's the most beautiful country, and I want you to have that opinion. But I want even more than that. I want you to see your response from me with your own opinion. You know what I mean? That you get to have that. Now let's debate it, because that's what I would really appreciate when you're on council, is that not only that you as citizens can walk up to council and sit there and say something to me, or better yet, when I'm at your door sitting there and says, I don't appreciate, oh, this would be great. I had a woman tell me when I went to a luncheon, she says, I want to tell you something. I don't appreciate you saying that you were not in favor of the closing of the street. I said, ma'am, I'm so sorry. I said, but I live in that neighborhood. You know, you can't help but think that I'm a citizen first. And I said, besides, if it comes to council, I'm sure I have to recuse myself from it. So, but I appreciated that, her coming to me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate when people walk up to me and tell me something that's contradictory to what I'm saying. I mean, I think I love the beauty of that. So, and I love to sit down with people like that, because I think what we end up finding out between each other, that what's between both of us is more the truth, and to come to that together. So what I'm hoping is that I get your vote. I hope that you've seen me as distinctly contrasted than my opponent, and that I hope you should expect me to work very hard and to keep reaching out to the citizens here in Kerrville. So thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, Mario. And if Mario gets elected, we'll do this once a month. How about that?
Oh,
So
you know what?
Idea exchange.
No, that's great. No, that's a really good idea. Oh my gosh, I love that. We should do that.
Well,
and better yet, let's get somebody that, if I have an opinion, somebody separate has an opinion, let's just do, man, that's great.
Well, I'll
See,
be
now
happy
you get
to do
it.
See,
Yeah.
I was a debater in high school and college, so this is what I like.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that.
We'll talk about that later, but I'll let you guys go. Make sure you get to vote. We have a few more days left of early voting. Still plenty of time to cast your ballot. Your last chance will be Saturday, May the 4th. It's all at the Callow Theater. On Saturday, May the 4th, the polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., so you have a nice long day to get out there. We just want to make sure everybody does voice their opinion no matter who you vote for.
Yep.
Get out there and get it done. And thanks for watching the videos that we've produced here with the candidates, and thanks to the candidates for participating. Thank you, Mario.
Thank you, sir. I really
Good deal.
appreciate it.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you so much. Yeah.
And I'm Aaron.